In the last video, I talked about some very core basic mechanics of Redstone, like the inputs and outputs, and basically just the basic stuff you need to know to get started being able to make Redstone circuits. And in this video, I'm going to be going into some slightly more obscure and technical details about components that not a lot of people know about, but that are actually ridiculously useful sometimes. Starting with block updates. This piston is not being powered. And of course, there's no power source around it, so it's not doing it. But as soon as I place a redstone block around it, it powers. But how does it know that it's being powered? Well, because the redstone block sends a block update to any blocks around it when it is placed. And a block update basically is just a refresh that refreshes the block data of any functional blocks around it that causes them to realize that they need to be powered or unpowered or changed or whatever they should be doing currently. So by placing a redstone block next to the piston, it updates it and tells it to turn on. And there are some interesting things that work with block updates, because one game mechanic actually that not a lot of people know about that I'm going to talk about is that pistons and dispensers and droppers actually were all coated with the same material as a door. So similarly to how a door is 2 blocks tall and it activates when you place a redstone block right here, these blocks will also actually activate if you place a block above them. So right now it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like this piston's being activated, but that's because there's nothing sending a block update to it. So you can power things without sending block updates to them, as long as you do some sort of subtle change that doesn't send any block updates to what you're trying to prevent from updating. So right now, we have this redstone block here in the piston, and as soon as we place a block that sends a block update to the piston, it will power. See? So it's basically like, you can think of it as the piston is asleep, and then as soon as you put the block here, it wakes up and realizes, oh, it's being powered. So then it powers. And the same thing happens when you're trying to deactivate it. So you can activate it, update it, and then deactivate it, and then you can place a block and deactivate it by updating it whenever you want. And the same thing happens for dispensers and droppers. So if I do this, it won't power, but if I place a block, it will update. Same thing with droppers, which is pretty interesting. And another useful thing with this, with the piston relation to doors. By the way, the piston relation to doors, like the reason why it does this, is called quasi-connectivity. So the formal term for the block above a piston being activated is quasi-connectivity, so I should make that clarification. This piston is being quasi-powered right now, but it doesn't realize it because I haven't set a block around it that updates it. And as soon as I do that, it will update, and it will push, and then it will retract. Because when the slime block moves, it sends an update to this piston that tells it this redstone block is now been pushed up there. So then it retracts and puts it back. Now you might look at a machine like this one, where it's quasi-connecting it, quasi-powering it, but then when you update it, it starts this infinite cycle of pushing and pulling the redstone block. Why can't I do this properly? There we go. It does this infinite cycle because of an interesting game mechanic that is known as sub-prioritizing. So, the best way to do this, demonstrate this, is with 2 pistons pacing into the same block. A piston can't push an extended piston, and you can see that because if I activate this piston, and then I try to act the other one, it won't activate. However, what happens when you activate 2 of these pistons that are facing into the same block? Which one goes first? Well, you might think it decides it randomly, but it actually decides it through a very specific order of events that it uses to prioritize which one comes first, to see what happens in specific cases like this. So one of the most common ways you can see this is because the game prioritizes different redstone components activating before others, so that there's a definitive and not random order that everything can work in. And it's a little funky sometimes. You can see that in this case, this piston activates first, but if I place it the other side, the same thing happens. And this is because of the repeaters. The repeaters basically remove any prioritization that came before themselves and replace it with some new order that the game decides. But what is really important is that the pistons also push and pull blocks in a very specific order each tick. So it might look like this piston is supposed to push this light gray concrete thing in a very specific order. Well, I mean, it might look like it's supposed to push it all at the same time, and it does, but in an order. And using a mod, you can see that order. So it will push this, then 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 this. And with a contraption like this, it starts by pushing the redstone block, and then it pushes the slime block. And what that does is the slime block updates the piston, and since the redstone block isn't there when it updates the piston, since the slime block comes after, the piston doesn't think it should be powered anymore, which is why it retracts instantly. And you can see the same effect here because it pushes the redstone block, then the slime block, and then it retracts it instantly. But you might wonder, why does this one retract and then not keep going, while the other one keeps going forever? Well, because this one, if I do /tick freeze, which freezes the game so that we can step through it by one tick at a time, when we update it, it pushes the redstone block, then the slime block, which updates the piston to retract. But what's important is that the order changes when the piston is retracting. So now it's going to retract the slime block first, then the redstone block. And that's important because it means the slime block will update the piston before the redstone block makes it all the way down. So by the time the piston is updated, it's not being powered yet. And then the redstone block comes, but then there's nothing updating it anymore, which is why it doesn't keep going. However, with this, it starts by pushing the slime block, which updates it, which tells it to retract. But the difference is that now, unlike before, it has the same order that it will retract. So it first has the redstone block coming first, then the slime block, and then over here, unlike this one, it still has the same order, which means the slime block will retract after the redstone block comes. So the redstone block comes, then the slime block retracts, updating the piston to reactivate itself, which is how you get the infinite looping effect. Now, there are some other ways that you can that you can make a butted redstone component. One of which is redirection, redstone redirection. So, using a very simple mechanism like this, because when a redstone dust is redirected, it doesn't directly send block updates. So, it is now facing the piston, which means that as soon as we update the piston, it will extend. And the same thing happens if we redirect the redstone dust away from the piston. And this can be automated using a simple machine like this one, where we have a target block that redirects this redstone dust to face the target block. And then as soon as we flick this lever, it will push this out of the way, which causes the redstone dust to be redirected towards the piston. And then as soon as we update it, it will activate. And the same thing happens when we retract this. Now that it's redirected that way, it's not powering this piston directly, and it will not deactivate until we update it. And that's another thing I should mention. There are select few blocks. Here are some examples. where redstone dust can forcibly be redirected towards it. So with things like dispensers and pistons, it won't try to redirect it towards itself, but with things like redstone blocks and target blocks and the front of an observer, it will always try to forcefully redirect itself into that block. So that's how this works. One of the most commonly known machines that uses this game mechanic is called a TNT duper. And basically the way it works is it starts with a mechanic relating to coral fans. So a coral fan relies on a block to be able to stay there. So as long as it's on a block, it doesn't break. But as soon as you break the block that it's on, it breaks too. And the way this can be used in a machine like this is because the block right here will push before the coral, as you can see from the piston's order. And when this block is pushed, there's no more block right here because it's pushed right here now. So the coral breaks because it realizes there's not a block there. But the coral comes after this block, which means that it only breaks once this block is pushed, but it's still there technically. Like it makes a clone of itself while it's in the pushing block phase, so to speak. And then when it's done pushing, it realizes there's a block and it doesn't, and then it stays still. But the interesting thing is that it sends a block update to this TNT, in the specific order of push coral, push TNT, update TNT. So the TNT is updated and pushed, which causes it to ignite and be pushed as a block, so you get a duplicated TNT. So if we redirect this signal to bud the TNT, then as soon as we tell this piston to push the TNT, it will cause itself to duplicate. So now we have an unlit TNT and a lit TNT. And this can be chained for multiple TNT in a row through some more advanced methods. The way this machine works, I'm not going to go too into detail, but I will explain how it works briefly. This piston starts by pushing this block, which updates and breaks this coral, which updates all of these TNT. But what actually happens is this block is cutting this redstone dust. So when you have a redstone dust wire going diagonally, if you place a block along it anywhere, it will cut the signal. So signals can't pass through it, as you can see. And right now that's happening here. There's a redstone torch that's activating a block that's activating this redstone dust. And it can't reach this because it's cut off by the block. But as soon as that piston pushes this block, it activates this because it uncuts it. And then this activates, this line. And then it activates this piston, which pushes this block, which causes it so that this redstone dust is no longer powered, which deactivates this redstone dust as the TNT ignites, which causes the TNT to all push and ignite in the same tick. And that's a basic explanation, but basically it's activating and deactivating the redstone dust in the same tick, which buzzes the TNT to duplicate, as you can see, which is pretty cool. And I'm not going to go in depth about how all of the, slight game mechanic things here and there work, but that's the basic concept of how a dust-based duper works. Now, something I mentioned in this first video was copper bulbs. Unlike lamps and a lot of other redstone components where you send a pulse and it turns on and off, copper bulbs toggle, which means they turn to the opposite state of whichever one they are in for every full pulse. So you turn on and then you turn it off, and that's one pulse. See? So it doesn't turn on and then off, it toggles for each pulse you give it. Which means that unlike lamps that go on and off for each pulse, they simply toggle to their opposite state. And this can be used for some interesting things like bulb chains, which basically requires a certain amount of pulses to reach the end. So for each copper bulb here, it will take double the amount of pulses that it took to turn the first one off. So this one takes 1 pulse to turn off, this one takes 2 pulses, this one takes 4 pulses, and this one takes 8 pulses. So 1 pulse, off, 2 pulse, this one goes off, 3, 4 pulse, this one goes off, 5, 6, 7, 8 pulse, and this one goes off. Which can make some pretty interesting things like binary encoders and pulse counters, but I'm not going to go too into detail because that's kind of advanced and I'm going to save it for another tutorial. But for this guide, I'm just going to briefly go over that because it's important that you should probably know that, because it's very useful in a lot of redstone machines, trust me. Now here's a technicality that you might have seen before, but not a lot of people actually understand everything about it. So there's a big difference between activator rails or just powered rails and redstone dust. Apart from the fact, of course, that this one is for minecarts. But you might see them commonly used for wiring, like for connecting an input to an output. And it has some benefits that makes this especially useful. So for one, you see, unlike redstone dust, which redirects itself towards other redstone dust by default, you cannot make individual lines that are right next to each other, as you can see, because all of these redstone dust are connected to each other. So they all activate each other, no matter which line you activate. But activator rails are separated. So like, if you have 2 lines right next to each other, you can still activate each individual line specifically for that one by using observers. Another useful feature for activator rails is that they can't be cut. So like I mentioned earlier, where a redstone wire can be cut with a block, which stops the signal, activator rails resume the signal through a block. So if you do this, it will not cut itself, which means you can send signals through it, which is pretty useful for a lot of wiring stuff that you might find yourself using later. One of the downsides of using rails is that they have much less pulse length. So redstone dust activates up to 15 blocks with a full pulse, as you can see. But rails only activate 9 blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Another downside is that redstone dust can turn, but activator rails can't. So redstone dust wires can make turns like this to get to the destination, but activator rails are strictly for straight and diagonal movements, like vertically diagonal. And you can also, of course, use normal rails, but they can't transfer redstone signals, so they're fundamentally useless, except for, like, not sending direct signals. There is another interesting difference, which isn't necessarily good or bad, but it depends on what you're using it for. Like I mentioned earlier, how the game processes all these crazy events that happen in the same tick in a very specific order. Well, the same applies to redstone dust and activator rails. So this redstone dust wire will activate all in the same tick, but in a different order, depending on how the game prioritizes it. So these command blocks are set to, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the same tick. I have a mod that will make it not do that. Like, it'll still activate in the same tick, but it'll show you the order that it activated in. So if I run this, you'll see it activates the first one, then the second, then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth. So it goes from this to this, which makes sense. But rails work in reverse. So instead, they will start from the end and go down to the first one. So I can show you this real quick. See, it starts with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So even though it's all in the same tick, it activates in the exact reverse order that redstone dust activates in. Now, you might already know, but most redstone components go by a redstone tick for the delay that it defines as the lowest delay. So, for most redstone components like redstone repeaters, the lowest delay between signals is 2 ticks because 1 redstone tick is 1 game tick. So you can see every 2 ticks that I step, it activates the next lamp. And it is pretty good differences in delay, but you can go even lower. So an interesting mechanic is that with the game, that scaffolding is always checking for if there's a block under it. Because if there's a full block under it, or at least a full topside block under it, it will change its state, as you can see, depending on if there's a block under it or not. And this effect chains upwards 1 extra tick for each consecutive scaffolding. So, this can be used for a simple machine like this. Very simple setup, where you flick this trapdoor, which changes the state of the scaffolding, then that one, then that one. And then it activates that by detecting the change of state with observers in that order, with 1 tick delays instead of 2 tick delays. You can also do the same thing similarly with placing a log next to leaves, because when you place a log next to leaves, they detect that, and then they chain the change of state since there's a log with 1 tick differences, as you can see. However, unlike scaffolding, it works a little differently when you break the log, because it depends on other leaves to detect that there's no more logs, and since the location for there not being a log is nowhere, it doesn't really work in as much of a predictable behavior. So as you can see, it will do kind of a little bit of a funky order there, but it does work for placing it. Now, one of the most obscure game mechanics with redstone is redstone ore can actually be interacted with. So, believe it or not, if you stand on a redstone ore or right-click it, it will actually activate itself. So by standing on it, you can do that, and you can you can detect this change of state with an observer, as usual, to send a pulse to something. Same thing works when you right-click it, like I said. And this can also be used for block update detectors because a redstone ore sends a block update when it is interacted with, which can also make for some pretty cool base entrances. Also, it deactivates itself after a random amount of time, so it's not as predictable for turning off, but it can make for some pretty cool machines and stuff. For one, you can make a base entrance with it like this. This observer detects the redstone ore, sends a signal, which deactivates this door. So I can right-click it, and then we get into our base. And you can replace it to close the door back up. Now, I talked about the basics of how a piston works in the first episode, but I'm going to go a little bit more detailed in this one. So, there are some blocks that pistons can't push or pull. Crying obsidian is one of them. Normal obsidian is also one of them. So you can't pull it either. And you can't push or pull it with slime. And then there's also some blocks that it can push, but that break when you push them. So pressure plates are one of them, for example. There's also lanterns, I believe. So if you place a lantern and then you try and push it, it just breaks. Yes. And then there's also some blocks that you can't push or pull, but that also break when you push them. And moss is one of those. Then there's also honey and slime. It's very important to note that honey and slime are fundamentally the same in most respects. One of the only differences is that honey causes entities to get stuck on them. As you can see, it's harder to jump and walk around, and you can slide down them. Also, they have a 1 pixel less hitbox than a full block, so there's that difference. And slime is a full block, and also it bounces instead of sticking you to it. One of the main differences, though, for redstone is, of course, that slime cannot pull or push honey, and honey cannot push or pull slime. Another interesting thing though with slime that I should note, even though it's not necessarily a mandatory thing to learn, is that slime, when it's pushed by piston, can actually launch entities. So you can see it kind of launches me there when I activate it. It can also launch you vertically. It can launch you in any direction. And it can launch any entity in any direction. So you can, since an item is an entity, you can also launch items. You can launch mobs, you can launch anything that's an entity, and you can tell if something is an entity because when you press F3 and V, it turns on hitboxes. And if something has a hitbox, you know it's an entity. This can also make for some pretty fun little contraptions like this one I made here that causes you to get pushed by this piston. It launches you across the ice, then this launches you, then this launches you, and makes a neat little chain, as you can see, where you just get launched in a circle forever, which is pretty fun. Actually, this is really satisfying. This might just be the rest of the video. In all seriousness, this is supposed to be a short tutorial, so I'm gonna stop it right around here. If you think it was worth watching, you could maybe leave a like, I don't know. But that's basically it for the technicalities in block inputs and outputs that you might have not known. If you did know it, then cool. If you didn't, I'm hoping you learned something useful from this, because a lot of these mechanics are going to be used a lot more in any future tutorials that I make, and generally they're just some really good knowledge to have for Redstone. So with that being said, that's the end of this short tutorial, so I'll see you in the next one. Peace.